a designer, we've got the site built, we're trying to figure out what to do with it, and now we're going to learn how to build on the success. What tools are out there, and which tools do you need? The first question is going to be about a webmaster. Do you need one or not? Essentially what a webmaster is your maintenance team. That's the person who keeps an eye on the website, makes sure everything's functioning properly. Very probably is the person doing your updates too. Now this may or may not be the same person as the designer. It might be somebody who didn't design the site but knows how to go in and maintain things, upload new photos, add new content. It may be the designer themselves. It's all going to depend on who you hired initially. Or it might be you. If you can do your own updates and you purchase the same software, this is something you can possibly take on. You want to keep in mind it can get time consuming depending on what kind of elements come into play. If you hire a web designer, or excuse me, a webmaster, you want to be sure to ask them how often are they willing to do an update. If they're offering a flat monthly rate, find out what that rate includes. If you need to update monthly, if you need to update weekly, if you may need to update all of a sudden on a Wednesday because a product's been discontinued, you need to be honest with your webmaster about that and find out what kind of charges will be incurred for those sorts of updates. You also want to find out how often they do backups. First, find out for sure that they do backups. And by backup, I mean all the files that are used to create your site. The originals will be somewhere on a computer. You want to make sure that those originals have been backed up onto a separate disk and are stored in a completely separate place, ideally a completely separate building. In our case, to be extra safe, because there's so much content on our site, we not only have the website that's on the server, but on 2 different laptops, we have backups, plus every month I burn an extra disk and put it in a fire vault. You've got to be sure to do that, because if, heaven forbid, the fire were to occur with your server, you want to be sure you still have all of your folders and your files. You also want to talk about life. And the reason I say that is you need to know if you like these people. If your webmaster is somebody that just drives you crazy, this isn't going to be a good working relationship, and it probably will be very short-lived. You want to be sure that you've got an easy rapport with them, that when they talk to you, they're not using technical jargon that's over your head, and that when you talk to them, they don't feel like there has to be any dumbing down of the topic. You want to be sure that you're on the same wavelength and that you can understand the terminology that they're using. You want to find out when they're available. Are you able to get them only Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or are they available 24/7? If it's a group of people who are a webmaster company, your odds are you've got 24/7 support. If it's one individual and he takes off on a 2-week vacation over the holidays to go skiing in Aspen, and then something happens with your website, you got problems. You want to also talk about how long it's going to take to make an update. Say, for instance, it's the beginning of the month and you've got a new monthly special you want to put on your home page. When do you need to provide that information, the photos or content, to them? Is it something that they need just a couple of days? Is it something that they need a couple of weeks? You need to find out how long it will take them to physically do the update on a page, how long to do a physical update on several pages, and you want to find out what the charges will be for those kind of updates. You also want to find out if they're going to put their rates in print, and I highly suggest doing this. Odds are there's not going to be any question and they'll be comfortable with it, but it's something you definitely want to ask about up front. Again, ask for references. Now keep in mind they're only going to give you referrals for people that they have good rapport with and that are happy with them. But still, even with that grain of salt, it's worth making the phone calls just to touch base. Find out from those references how often are they having updates done, what kind of requirements do they have that might be similar to your own, and kind of find out what the working relationship and the time frame seems to be. You want to find out how long your webmaster's been a webmaster. Is this something they just learned over summer and are doing for the first time now, or is it something they've been doing for 5 years and can basically close their eyes and cruise through it with no sweat? Will they be using the same software that you already own a copy of? Remember, if the designer is somebody different and you bought software to match designers, odds are you might have another software issue here. It really isn't an issue. Again, it comes down to whether or not you want to be doing some of the incremental changes and also having the webmaster maintain some as well. It's just a talking point that you want to find out for sure who can do what and how easily. You also want to ask how often they review site stats, because remember, if you're hiring a webmaster, part of their job should be to look at the site stats. You want to be sure it's done on a regular schedule. Again, you want apples to apples comparisons. If they do a site stat on Mondays, keep it on Mondays so that when you're comparing one week to the next, you've got the same Monday through Friday pattern. In our case, we can tell if it's the accurate time frame because we see the different patterns based on when people are at work and not at work. And believe me, there are a lot more people cruising the net at their office than you may realize. Now, SEO is another animal entirely, and this one's a little harder to wrap your head around. SEO is search engine optimization. And basically what that means is a way to make sure that when someone does a Google search, you get as high on the first page as you can possibly get. Now, admittedly, if you're expecting someone to go in and search stationery wedding invitations, it's not going to put any of us at the top of the page. It's too broad, and it's going to get everybody on the planet that fits into that category. However, if somebody goes in and searches stationery wedding invitations Minneapolis, I want to see my name somewhere near the top of that first page on the Google search, as does everybody else. Search engine optimization is the method of trying to predict how that is done. Now, algorithms are what search engine companies use, and they change these algorithms, or a mathematical equation essentially, to find different ways to kind of juggle and search and see what goes on what page. They have to keep changing them, otherwise it would be too easily predictable and there'd be too much abuse of the system, for lack of a better term. There are companies that you can hire for SEO work. You get what you pay for, but you've got to take a grain of salt into that one too. Nobody can promise top of the page, page one with Google or Yahoo. There's just no way accurately to predict that. You do want to talk to somebody who they've worked with, several somebodies if possible, to find out what the other client's experience has been. Have they seen their sites moving up higher on the searches? There will always be a lot of promises, but it's very, very difficult to verify the accuracy of that kind of work. And again, because the algorithms change frequently, what works today may not work tomorrow. Be realistic, talk to their other clients, and try to get a handle on it. Now, something that may be suggested is what's called pay-per-click. Basically, this is a program through any number of different organizations, including some of the big advertising sites, that you can literally set up a program, set a monthly budget for what the maximum is that you want to spend, and then every time a customer, a potential customer, clicks on a link during a search that gets into your website, you're charged. So for each click, there's a payment. It's not always the best option. It's not a guarantee that those clicks to your website are going to translate into sales later on. You can try it, experiment a little bit, no long-term commitment, but you always want to be sure that when you set your ceiling, you're aware that that's going to be the maximum you're allowing them to spend. So if your ceiling is set too low and you get a lot of clicks at the beginning of the month, all of a sudden you're not part of the search where you were before as the pay-per-click. Being a pay-per-click is going to give you an optimal position, but you are going to pay for it. Now, monitoring site traffic, as I mentioned earlier, you need to do. You need to read your site stats and get a handle on what's happening or not happening. You want to be sure to work with simple software so that if you want to do your site stats yourself, you can. There's one called Sawmill that's a wonderful program. I use it with a Mac. I believe it's available for PC too, but there are any number of great stat programs. Some hosts offer the site stat printouts and things from a cPanel, which is a control panel for your website. Ask the customer support people or the tech support people at your host and see if that's an option through them. Again, you want to keep a schedule, you want to keep a binder, and you want to keep it all together so that you can go back and refer to things later. Every holiday season, I'll pull the previous year's binder, and I'll look at the traffic patterns late October through mid-December to remember again what promotions worked, what the timing was, and when we saw the most traffic so that I can be sure I've got the most important content available at that time. Email blasts are one more piece of the equation. Remember that a little bit goes a very long way. You don't want to be an annoying little gnat that keeps showing up in somebody's email box. Just as was the case with a press release, you want to make sure that it's worthy of the time and attention that you're asking them to give you. Relevant information only, no fluff, and be sure again that you're using a permission-based list. And blogging, if you choose to go into the blog, it's an easy thing to do, even for someone who's not very tech savvy. There are all sorts of different blog programs that you can use. A simple Google search will be a good place to start. Or if you've read other blogs that you really like, scroll down to the bottom of the page and see what software they're using, because quite often you'll see a reference to where the source of the blog is. So now we've given you a whole big toolbox full of things to do, things to think about, and directions to go with your website. Again, it's nothing to be afraid of, but it's basically your great big giant billboard to the entire world, and this is what puts you on a level playing field with the big boys. Give it a shot, crawl up on the elephant, and ride the heck out of that thing until you make a pile of money. Well, thank you very much for joining me for all of these segments. I hope that it's been entertaining as well as educational, and that your future is very, very bright. Thanks. I'm Cinda Baxter. Knock 'em dead.